Hey guys, welcome back. Today is a big day. It's a big day for me, big day for the channel, and it's a big day for the individual that's going to be joining us today. Today we're going to interview a pre-birth experiencer, and his experience is very identical to mine. So just with that alone, it makes it special. And the fact that he decided to use this channel to share his experience is awesome to me. There's lots of other avenues out there, and he decided to use this one. So for that, I'm very grateful. And it's a good one. It's going to be intense. So buckle up. And at the end of the video, there will be an announcement. So try to, stick with us. And with that being said, fellow mystics, initiates of the flame, my name is Harold, and welcome to the End of Agnoia. Okay guys, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my good friend named Seth. Seth, come on in.
Hi, Harold.
Hey,
How are
how's it
you?
going? You want to tell everybody how we met?
Well, I actually saw your video about a year and a half ago, and since I have pretty extensive pre-birth memories myself, I recognized right away that yours was a real case. And I just had to get to know you and speak to you about your experience. So I looked you up, and we've been talking ever since we finally figured out the email system so we could communicate.
Yeah, I know. It took me a long time to actually respond because I was kind of taking a hiatus for a while there, and I didn't really feel like, speaking to anybody about my experience anymore. It's, dealing with the community can be quite intense sometimes, and I'm so glad I actually responded because now I met a good friend. So yeah, it's been really nice meeting you.
Yes, ditto. And you're a very courageous man for getting out here and posting the first video, and now, enhancing your channel, trying to discuss these really, I think, complex issues. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and I think we both agree that there's strength in having two people with pre-birth memories discuss their experiences together, because there's strength through what we experienced and what we know, and specifically what we know about the system and how the system operates.
Absolutely, and there's also strength in our disagreements too. And I feel like
Oh, we don't disagree. Harold, we never disagree, right? Let's
It's
be
true.
honest here.
It's true. Sometimes, no.
Sometimes.
And that's totally fine, right? And that's what we're going for. We want
Yes.
to hear all angles, and we're not going to stop until hopefully we can explain what we saw and get to the bottom of everything.
Correct. So you might want to explain why I'm an orb. I'm a real person, but I'm floating around here in your beautiful library.
Yeah. I think we just wanted to keep your identity sealed for now for personal reasons, and I totally understand that. I'm still not sure why I'm doing this, putting my face out there. I think part of the reason why I'm doing is just for, you know, putting a face to this makes it more real for people, and I know you can understand this and resonate with this. The seriousness of what we're talking about is it's huge. So but again, we put ourselves out there. I do have a career myself, and you have a career, and there's a lot at stake sometimes, socially, talking about these kind of things. And that's not new. That stigma has been happening for thousands of years, right?
Absolutely. I mean, here we are, and we are expecting the viewers to believe us that we remember before we were born here on Earth. And there's many people that would say we were delusional or we were crazy or making this up. So, uh, yeah, there's reasons, but someday I will come out and come out of the closet, and we're going to go around talking about these experiences because I think they're really the most important thing for every person on Earth
I
that
know.
has a soul, at least.
Yeah, it's bizarre to say that. I'm just a regular dude, and but I know for a fact the things we saw and experienced is the most important thing to be discussed ever. We're sort of
It
like
is.
we're
And sorry. And we need to be very clear right away that our memories were not a dream. And you tried to explain this before on one of your videos. So when we remember something, we actually go back to where we were, what we saw, what we felt, what we knew. And that's going to be a big part of my story because I remember knowledge that I had on the other side. And it wasn't a dream because dreams, after time, you start to forget the details. For example, there's common dreams, like everybody has a dream probably about flying at some time, maybe during childhood. Now, I can't go back to that dream and say, oh, I remember every scene by scene instance in what happened in my dream. In contrast, with my pre-birth memory, I can. And if I just go back and quietly think or meditate about what happened, I not only return, but I can recall my feelings at the time or what beings told me, which was telepathic communication, and keep on reliving the whole experience. And decades go by, and this memory doesn't fade. In addition, people with NDEs usually have their experience strongly imprinted in their mind. So when they come back to Earth and tell others, it's a very vivid experience.
absolutely, and they come back, and they even come back with powers and special abilities, and their lives are changed forever. So, and I know you resonate with that as well. Just having this experience before anything shaped who I am. So,
Well, you were already a good soul. And I think that's one message I want to confirm with everybody that on the other side, we were good beings. We didn't have a bad part. We didn't have a negative part. We didn't have an evil part. We actually were pretty naive, almost childlike in our experience. Yet we were also very old at the same time. And that's something you pointed out in your video, your first video. But we didn't want to go to Earth because it was terrifying for us. And we were shown Earth and we sensed what it looked like. We saw what it looked like. But did we really need to go? At the time, we thought absolutely not. So I'll stop there, but that kind of gets into the PBM.
It does. So Seth, let's go ahead and start with your experience. What was the first thing you saw?
Well, I have two early memories. They were in different places, but I'm going to focus on the one that led directly to me incarnating into a fetal body and coming to Earth. So I was in a dark place, which I'm going to say was a void. And I remember it was almost like not existing or being in a very deep sleep. There were other beings around me, likely also asleep, but I remember being called forth. And right now, as I'm describing this, I'm seeing it again. And I felt almost like if there was a rope or chain in my chest, just pulling me forward. So at that moment, I wasn't sure whether I had a body or not, but I definitely felt that like a central pulling from my chest, pulling me forward. Also, there were three beings in front of me, and what called me forth may have been those beings, but behind the beings, there was also a very huge white light. And I think I was called forth by simply my name, which would have been my soul name. After some research in Roy Mill's book, The Soul's Remembrance, he speaks about each soul having a unique name. So me being called forth, I've since concluded was that my name was simply being called. And it could have been either from these three angelic beings who wore robes, or this giant light source. And when I saw the light source, I thought, oh, this is God. I want to merge with God, like just magnetically. And I tried to do that, but I was stopped kind of like in midair, and these three beings kind of escorted me off to the left, and I knew they were calling me forth because I had to incarnate on Earth, which was already upsetting to me. So I'll stop there, but that's my initial sequence of what I see, remember, and felt.
Wow. And like we spoke about before, it's pretty significant that you also dealt with three beings as well. Could you remember when you said it was the three beings that stopped you from merging? Did you feel a sense of fear when they were holding you back from merging with Source or with the light?
No, it was more restraint. It was almost like I was higher up going towards the big light, and it was almost, I would say, like they threw a lasso or some sort of force field to kind of just stop me there midair. And I was also like just accelerating and then suddenly was stopped. And it was a slight moment of disappointment. Like I felt like, oh, I'm not worthy or I'm not allowed to do this. But it was something I couldn't even stop. I mean, I just felt I was in the presence of God and I immediately want to merge with the being God.
Yeah.
Also, there wasn't any emotion from this big white light, which later on in time, meaning here on Earth, that is a question I have because it wasn't a loving um, emanation from the big being of light.
Um, about that feeling, like you said, it didn't feel loving. Did it just feel neutral? Like a neutral vibe, or how else would you describe that?
It felt like it had no feelings, like there was just no feelings to it, almost artificial.
That's
So
incredibly
that
interesting.
is something some people may not want to hear, but you know, I'll say early on, and then we'll talk about this later, but whether we're dealing with divine entities, divine beings, or some people have a theory about an AI like environment or matrix that's somehow generated in some way that's a simulation. I'm not sure. But in that case, there were, there wasn't a strong loving emotion. And that was a little bit shocking to me at the time.
And with that being said, what about the three beings? How did you feel about them?
They had a lot of power. They were almost like angelic soldiers protecting this big light being. And they definitely meant business with me. And they actually had to restrain me. We kind of were went off to the left and they actually kind of like tackled me. And I remember bending down and each being had a robe on that was kind of like a um, wine colored, uh, deep kind of red brown robe on. And I remember looking at the sleeve of one of the beings robes robe, and there was a beautiful blue, um, electric midnight blue light shimmering all around his sleeve. And I remember they were telling me how the system worked and what the rules were and how I had to behave essentially and conform. So that was kind of an interesting experience.
Yeah, my experience was very similar to that. It was like you were mentioning earlier, you feel sort of like a child, and you're just excited, you're beaming around, jumping around, and they're just trying to say, "Hey, we have stuff to do, like hurry up, hurry up." And I've thought about that I've thought about this so many times, and it's just sort of thinking back, it seems like they were just trying to hurry up the process, because
They were definitely in a hurry.
yeah, that hurrying sensation is there, right?
Yes. They wanted to move me along because it was almost like an assembly line.
Yeah, I felt the exact same way. So after the beings tried to restrain you, what happened after that?
So I didn't want to go. So I requested to be able to see Jesus. And why this is interesting to me now is that I had knowledge that Jesus had some sort of power. Um, he was like an administrator, and I could appeal to him or thought that he would advocate on my behalf so I wouldn't have to incarnate and go to Earth. So that was something I didn't experience. I just knew at the time, which I think is pretty interesting.
Wow. So, when you called upon Jesus, the Jesus showed himself to you, right? He did he come automatically? How did that happen?
Interestingly, not right away. There was a lag time, and I didn't get to see him first. And by that, I mean that I actually saw first who I knew at the time was the Virgin Mary. Now, I'm telling you this story not being a Catholic at all. I'm a Protestant. And that was very interesting. And Mary was the first being I saw that looked human, meaning had a human form to them. Then beings, by the way, that first restrained me, you could not see their faces. And we know that's a pretty common thing with these beings. Their faces are not easily seen in pre-birth memories or perhaps even NDEs. But Mary did have a human face and had a light type of body when it kind of glowed. And interestingly, she played the function of almost being like Jesus's secretary. That she controlled access to Jesus, and I had to wait with her first until Jesus was ready to see me. And this was all in the area that was completely black. There were no obvious walls, just kind of everything suspended. No stars. This wasn't out in space. I just remember, the void essentially. But eventually I did get to see Jesus, and he first looked human. He did have a white robe on. And right away with him, I started to sense immense power of how powerful he was. And he telepathically discussed a few things. I mean, I don't remember the specifics. And with pre birth memories, parts of scenes are very sharp and exact, other parts are more blurry and fuzzy. And that may be due to the way our memories were erased or partially erased, at least. And Jesus decided in communicating with me that, I don't recall the exact message, but it had to be something like, I have to go no matter what. And then Jesus changed and he started to emit this beautiful golden light. And something happened to me. I had at one point looked down at my forearm to see whether I had a body or not, and I did see that my forearm was transparent. So I had a humanoid form, but it was more like a ghost-like transparent shape. I'm going to refer to that as spirit body going forward. And that I believe was my form when I was speaking with Jesus. But when he changed and started to emit a lot of golden light, that actually made me transform from having a spirit body into an orb. And that was a real experience because it's almost like a welling up from your feet up to your head. And I just became this round ball of light. And the light emanating from Jesus was just unbelievable. It was the most wonderful, unconditional love that I've ever felt, and far surpassing anything here on earth. And when I looked out, I could see thousands of orbs floating around Jesus, all bathed in this beautiful golden light. And I actually remember kind of, bouncing up and down a little bit and just circling him in this warm, loving light of unconditional love. And I remember thinking, it was so wonderful. I never, ever, ever wanted to leave. So I think I'm in a state that when I was younger, I thought that was all a good thing. Now I don't think it was a good thing, and we can discuss that later. But essentially, Jesus was kind of energizing me or preparing me to incarnate. So he wanted to give me a little love boost, essentially. Um, you might have heard of love bomb being discussed online with these beings, but that's actually what occurred. And from there, Jesus actually took me on a little tour. So I'll stop there, but that's the sequence.
Yeah, sounds a lot like mine. It's very eerie, though. Again, I didn't see Jesus in mine, but the sequence is so similar. And so I'm curious. Again, you were saying that Jesus was emanating all the love and everything. How did you feel towards your and the three beings? Did you feel love emanating from them too? What about Mary?
No, not from the three beings. They seemed more like prison guards or police officers, especially when they had me kind of tackled and were on top of me, holding me down. They're very soldier-like I said, almost like protectors, especially of the big white light being. And Mary was more neutral, I would say. Um, Definitely a female presence from her. Uh, she was pretty fair. Um, but it was mostly the waiting and knowing that I just couldn't immediately see Jesus and go in. And I think that this is interesting from my perspective is that I actually asked to see Jesus, and that occurred. So this was all on my request, and maybe in your pre-birth memory you didn't request that, but I did request his an interview with him essentially to plead my case.
Yeah, it seems like intention goes a long way up there. And not to take your shine away, like the moment when right before I saw Earth, I was sort of just I went into this area where I was receiving infinite knowledge, and it was my intention to do so. And I've gone back and forth on that part where I was thinking, well, maybe they're injecting that information to me, but looking back at it now, I realize that it was my intention. I went up into an area and I was just absorbing all this information, just pouring into me at the speed of light. And I think that's exactly why the guides kind of feel like they're policing you, because they want you to get down to earth as fast as possible and they don't want you to learn too much. What do you think about that, Seth?
Absolutely, I agree. um One thing I'm not telling you is I have multiple pre-birth memories on different scenes, different locations, and another one that I have is I was in a queue in line, um, in a area that had stone walls, and there were multiple beings in line, almost like an amusement park ride, waiting to incarnate, and we had to stand, you know, uh, face to back in a line, and uh, we weren't able to all go at one time. We had to wait, and basically there was a kind of a rush to kind of push the line through, I would say as well. Before one of my visuals is that I saw the being in front of me actually have to step forward and disappear when that soul actually incarnated to Earth. So there's definitely a process occurring, and there's lines or queues, and they are rushed sometimes to try to get people, meaning the souls, to incarnate as quickly as possible.
That is just a huge key point and a common theme we've seen in all these pre-birth experiences. Like all of them feel rushed. So
And
again,
why is
after you,
that?
I think it's because they know, again, it's they if they don't contain us, we won't be able to be used as cannon fodder, in Earth realm. That's what I think it is. But again, not to segue too much, I want to hear the rest of your story. So after you felt the loving light from, Jesus, what happened after that? What happened after that?
Well, let's just say after Jesus got me in the right mood and more pliable, maybe to agree to incarnate, he took me on a big tour. And we approached Earth from far out in orbit and eventually came up pretty close to it. And there was almost a platform beneath my feet. It was a clear, transparent platform. And we were both on this platform looking at Earth very close up. It was a beautiful Earth. The blue atmosphere and the clouds and everything. There was also another being on this platform to my left, and Jesus kind of handed me off to this other being, and I went to a different area at that point in the void. It was all dark, and a projection or image of Earth was shown to me, including where on Earth I would be born, what country, what state I would be in. And actually, we were able to, me and the being, were able to see scenes occurring with my mother and another relative as my parents were being revealed to me. So I didn't get to choose my parents, although some individuals with PBMs state that they have or had that choice. But I was shown who my mother would be. And I was actually even able to zoom in to that scene. And what do I mean by that? Well, a lot of these projections, whether they're on screens or holographic like screens or, you know, another means, movie theater type screen, you can actually, as a soul, go into this scene and feel and experience the emotions of people that you're watching, and kind of scan them in a way. And I actually did that to my mother and found out a little bit about her personality. Even though I wasn't, physically on Earth, I was able to do this all pre-birth, which I thought was very interesting. Or at least I think it's interesting now.
Oh no, it's extremely interesting. In fact, I can't think of anything else that's more interesting. But you mentioned first of all, so Jesus was your tour guide?
Yeah, he was a tour guide. And it's not uncommon when you listen to other people with pre-birth memory events, or even people with NDEs, that Jesus seems to be promoting incarnation quickly. Like, get ready to go to Earth. You need to go. Or if you're an NDEer, oh, you want to stay here on the other side? Nope, you really need to return to your physical body that just died on Earth pretty quickly. So he's pro-incarnation, at least the Jesus that I interacted with, which today, we can talk about this in future segments, makes you wonder a little bit. What type of Jesus was I actually dealing with?
Yeah, it seems to fly in the face of everything were ever taught here, right? In terms of any religion, and also, Gnostics. It flies in the face of everything. So something is happening clearly, and it's gonna be awesome, diving into this. But another thing you mentioned I wanted to bring up is you saw the Earth, and you mentioned that it was it looked like a blue, like the typical Earth, with clouds and blue atmosphere.
Yes. And also when I was taken to the other area, when I saw an image of Earth, and it very well could have been also, I think it was more of an image because it just didn't seem as real being on the platform in front of Earth with Jesus. I mean, that to me was the real Earth. But in this other area, and I have a image of this you can share later. the earth that showed where I'm gonna be born at, and then I saw my mother and went into that scene. Um, that still looked normal, but I will say this: I have another memory of me, maybe being in again the void, a dark place with other beings, and they were teaching me about Earth or having to come to Earth. And when I saw Earth at that time, that's where I was really terrified because Earth changed from a beautiful planet into this dark, uh, black, bubbling mass in front of me. Yes, with a few little lights in it here and there shining out of the darkness. But I, again, as a soul, I had my senses were enhanced, and I could, look into things and feel or sense situations or individuals or people or events. And when I did that to this earth that was just this big, bubbling, ugly black mass, I sensed all the pain and suffering on earth. And I also had a few scenes of wars occurring and all the negativity that is, part of our day-to-day experience here on the planet. So I was so upset when I saw that, all the chaos, all the pain, all the suffering, that I thought, I'm not going to that place. That place is crazy. So I thought that and knew that pre-birth, which is maybe one reason why I was so afraid to incarnate and requested to see Jesus to try to get out of the process.
Yeah.
You had, by the way, that experience.
Yes. And I think that's why, we get along. I think that this.
Let's talk about that for a second. I'm sorry. How is it possible that you and I saw the same thing pre-birth? We have to start putting that out there. Because
I
we're
know.
not crazy. These are our memories, etc.
We're not the only ones. I've heard other pre-birth experiencers explain it the exact same way. And I truly feel like this moment deserves its own video and in-depth description, because it's one of the main reasons why I'm doing this channel, is because I want to truly express in depth what that felt like. Because what you just described is like just pure horror, and I feel it needs to be articulated in a way that's just more understandable, and we just go into more depth because it's that important, So I think that should be like another conversation for another day. It deserves its own multiple videos even.
Exactly. So from there, I was taken to a different area after I saw my mom. And it was definitely almost like the classroom. And there was one being who, again, had a robe on. You couldn't see their face. And I'm going to start calling these beings guides, because that's another thing. These educational beings were what I would call in English guides. And I remember the podium because it was so class-like to have, a robed instructor behind the platform or podium. In front of, or to the side of that, were these very large holographic screens. And by holographic screens, I mean that they were translucent. You could see through the screen, but it still had an image on them. And then to my right, there was a female guide. And, when you're in your soul form, you can kind of sense masculine or feminine or other types of energy emanating from beings. And this female guide was standing in front of me, or to my side, and we were standing in front of these screens, and we were watching every single, well, at least the significant time points in my life, the different scenes that would play out. And why were we doing this? Well, there was kind of a back and forth discussion telepathically on oh, you're at this point in your life. If you make decision A, you'll be taken down this pathway. And if you don't make decision A, you make decision B, you'll be taken down another pathway in life, and something different will happen to you. Also, in these screens, I was able to go into the scene and experience what other people would feel or would say, or react to me in some way if I said something to them. But I definitely was a life preview process. So I'm going to refer to this as my life preview. And, years ago, I didn't think anybody else had life previews. I certainly heard about people with near death experiences having life reviews, but mine was a preview. And one of the disturbing things about this live preview was that the very last screen on my right showed my death. And I didn't know that. The beings told me this, that there was a female being on my right-hand side, and there was also a male being to my left and back of me. And it's not uncommon, too, to have these guide beings either to your left or right. And again, you really can never see their faces well, but you just know they're there. You can just sense it because you have these extra senses as a soul. But I remember they told me, oh, and now we're going to show you your death. And I knew Earth was going to be painful and I would have to go through all these challenges. And so I certainly didn't want to see that. So I tried to look away, kind of look to my right, but I did, maybe just because I had a 1% curiosity. I looked at the screen and immediately I was pulled into the scene, and I now know how I'm going to die because I was in a car accident and I saw the place where I was, etc., which is really weird because I've had to, exist here on Earth knowing, at least the pre-birth, I was shown the means and way that I was going to die.
That's a lot. That's super heavy. It's interesting because I relate to the whole seeing, the again, the life pictures and the frames. So, that's what you call them. But for me, it was really rapid, and I didn't dive into them and, look at specific details. It was like an overall encompassing thing for myself. But you were shown your death. That's. I don't think I've heard that in a pre-birth experience yet. At least not that I could recall. And that's something pretty heavy to live with. Do you feel comfortable? I mean, you did already say that it was going to be a car crash, right?
Yeah. But I'm afraid of flying, which doesn't make any sense. So every time I get a plane, I should reassure myself, hey, it's going to be a motor vehicle accident. Don't worry. You're going to make the flight okay.
So the amazing thing about what we're doing here is, I don't even want to put this out there, but I mean, you're sort of at least putting this out there in case, something like that does happen. It's sort of like proof, it's going to be a big deal. So that's why I feel we should definitely, try to keep this going and, keep people up to date on our lives. Stuff like this, these little confirmations are going to be everything for people, I think.
Exactly. And only recently, and this is off topic, but we've exchanged videos on what is time, what is consciousness, and only recently did I see one presentation, and these were from scientists, experts in their field in physics or neurobiology, neuropsychology, etc., where time is kind of like a movie in some theories where we are just in one little frame of the entire movie, and we're experiencing the movie in a forward-moving, frame-by-frame fashion. And I would long thought about, like, my whole life was up on these screens. How could it be there before I even lived it on Earth? How is that possible? But if you do break it down into individual scenes, the movie's already there and the future is actually already predetermined. We are just experiencing our lifetimes here in a frame by frame manner. Now, does that mean we can't make decisions and have a little free will to change what happens here and there? Of course we do. But the whole kind of storyline is already set. And in my case, my death seems to be set. So I think that's very interesting for me. A time reality discussion.
Yo, it's massive. And I have one of those as well. And again, not to keep interjecting my experience with yours right now, but I mentioned in my pre-birth experience, I was supposed to witness a massive event that pretty much eclipses any event that ever happened. And that's another reason why I wanted to start doing this, so I can put that out there. In case if I, leave this earth before any kind of event happens, that was some sort of deception that happened. So I think it's important that we're just putting this information out there for people. So Seth, let me ask you, after they showed you your death, what happened after that?
Well, I went to yet another area, still in the void. And when I talk about the void too, this is hard for some people to understand, but it is a very dark black space, pitch black, but you can still see within it. Certainly, if anything emits light, if it's in front of you, but it's also kind of like if you, I don't know, you're in a dark room that's completely closed and you turn off the lights and it takes a while for your eyes to adjust, that you then discover, oh, there is a little trace light here in the room. I can kind of see around. That's kind of what the void is like. So still in a completely dark area, there was another being that approached me, and this is a large male being who definitely did not emanate any love or positive feeling. But the being told me telepathically, and now I'm going to erase your memory. So it was right before the point where I entered a tunnel-like structure to come to Earth, which to me involved interstellar travel. And I was told by the being, okay, and now I'm going to erase your memory. I remember thinking very strongly with every fiber I had in my soul. I said to myself, oh, no, you're not. I'm going to remember. And my intention was to remember for a few reasons. And you and I have discussed this prior to this video. But one was that I knew I was going to Earth and it was going to be so difficult and traumatic. I wanted to remember the other side, so I had a little bit of maybe help, psychological help to get through my difficult experiences on Earth, that there was something more than just our day-to-day lives. But I also wanted to remember because I really felt like at the moment that this whole experience of incarnation was a scam. I mean, it was more of a nefarious, scandalous situation that I was being, coerced or forced to incarnate. So I was definitely going to remember. I was going to resist, and it was because my resistance that I had these memories. I believe now, and I've had them since I was very young, even before puberty. They've stayed with me for decades. They're sharp as ever. What I just described, I went back and I visually saw, even in this conversation, in any sentences that I'm saying. So yeah, I wasn't going to forget. And then I was guided with this being through a tunnel. It was very turbulent. There were other beings in this tunnel too. The tunnel itself wasn't completely, its walls weren't solid. I saw stars pass by, galaxies pass by, and eventually I ended up inside the womb with a guide that took me on the journey present, and I was before my fetal body. And I actually saw some of it. I believe you have this in your pre-birth memory too. It's kind of like when you close your eyes and you're in front of a very bright light, you can see the light, you can kind of see your skin, your pink skin, you can see the light. That's kind of what I remember being near or in my body when I was placed into it. And I thought about this for a while, like, how is that possible within a womb to be able to see anything, right? Because the uterus has a muscular wall to it, and although it's very distended, later in pregnancy, or at least midterm to late term, um, is there any really outside light producing this light? My current view is that this is some sort of spiritual light that's actually produced at the time, if we're going to be able to see things, which I know you recall seeing something, and so do I. So I was in my body for a long time resting. Interestingly, I do have some out of body experiences when I was already on Earth as an infant, and I don't know whether I was in my fetal state and then out of my body floating around a room, or if I had actually been born as an infant and then I was floating out around in the room. But I recall that. But I did get a pre-birth communication right before birth from a guide from someone that stated, now it's time you're going to be born. So I got a little forewarning as well. So I can say that in reviewing this process with you that it was pretty regimented. I asked to see Jesus. I got in, I saw him. He gave me the love bomb. I went on the tour. I was shown who my parents would be. I didn't really have a choice. I was just kind of auto guided through the process. I saw my life preview. I then had my memory erased. I went through the tunnel. I was escorted right to my fetal body and even warned that I was going to be born. So I had to give the system some credit. They kind of guided me step by step, in a hand-to-hand fashion, all the way through the process. So they did a pretty good job with that, at least.
Amazing. Again, it's you and I talked about this before. There's just endless information we can talk about with every little second that happened, right? One thing I wanted to bring up really quick is that you mentioned that you were forced, and that's always going to ring across the community, right? We're going to be talking about the whole consent thing a lot, and I wanted to touch on that really quick. So how do you feel about that personally? Do you feel completely that you were forced and had zero choice whatsoever, or did you consent at the end of the day?
Well, I can say with 100% confidence I was coerced. So it wasn't like any of the beings were paying any attention to how terrified I was. And I really want everybody to think about the word terrified, because you were terrified and I was terrified. When you're terrified, it's not like, oh, you're just a little bit of afraid of doing something. It's no, you're actually in a state of being terrified. And that's how afraid I was to actually come to Earth. I mean, you can sense love on the other side, but you can also sense severe fear, being terrified, etc. So despite me feeling that way, and also knowing I was a good being, I didn't think I had to go to Earth, okay? I mean, why did I have to go to Earth? And despite my protest in one way or another, it didn't matter. And they were just funneling me through this system as rapidly as they could to achieve my incarnation. So I would have to say at the minimum, I was 100% sure I was coerced and forced. I mean, because in that state, we didn't talk about the guides and how they looked and so forth, but yes, they were, robed beings. Often they're always larger than souls or our spirit bodies on the other side, according to many PBM accounts. And it's a system that we're already under their authority, essentially. in the PBM experience. So we kind of had to listen to them. I mean, they were our teachers, our security guards, our prison guards, however you want to describe them. They were still managing us. So again, at minimum coercion. And I have to say overall, yeah, I was forced. They wouldn't let me stay there because I didn't want to go. They didn't listen to any of my concerns or my fears. So maybe it's a fine line between strong coercion and being forced, but I don't think it's exactly wrong to say, at least some of us were not forced to come here. We actually were forced to come here. We just didn't volunteer and say, oh, we want to come to Earth because we know we can make it better and help everybody.
Yeah. Again, that's a huge statement. For me, like I said, personally, it was a bit of both. Like you said, at minimum, coercion, right? At minimum, the pushing around and the nature of being rushed is there. And again, for me personally, it was a little bit of both. I consented because I chose my body and I chose my life. So I do think that there could be special spirits out there that can get out in that moment, even though we're playing by their rules. I just don't think, I think the community gets in a frenzy in this topic because, again, they hear forced and then they automatically think, oh, we're stuck forever. And that's, to me, I don't think that's the case at all. This is not just as simple as forced. There is no consent, no free will. This is a multi-layered consent and non-consent situation. What do you think about that, Seth?
I totally agree. And I also believe pre-birth memory individuals that say they chose to come here or they came here because they thought they could help, you know, mankind. You've heard stories from people that claim they're star seeds and they came from some other planet or galaxy here to Earth to help out. So I don't discount their accounts, but my point is, for me personally, oh yes, I was coerced slash forced, no doubt, tackled, restrained. My memory was taken from me against my will. I had to resist to retain some of it. And in your case, for the viewers, you actually negotiated keeping some of your memories in exchange for a more difficult life here on Earth, which is interesting. So there is some bargaining that can go on as well. So I think, for future videos, we can talk about the complexities of all these different operations. But there's more than one way to skin a cat, and there's more than one way things happen on the other side. And it's detangling what we can to figure out how it operates and what it means for each person here on Earth.
Perfectly said. I couldn't have said that better. And I think it's so important we're talking about this because you've had a glimpse into the community's mindset about this. It's incredibly divisive. And basically people are sitting there, spinning their wheels. So I think it's important that we have these discussions. And I'm beyond honored that you shared your story with me and everybody else. So with that, is there anything else, any other details you might want to mention?
Not for this segment, but I definitely have other pre-birth memories we can talk about that didn't involve the time sequence of me incarnating and being placed here on Earth. I have other memories and knowledge of different scenes and events, which we can talk about in a different presentation.
I agree, Seth. I think we should definitely continue that and have like its own thing. We'll call it something like remembrances or something like that. Because just for example, your experience brought up a remembrance in mine. And that was, even though I made that deal to remember, I remember when I started getting shot down the tunnel, the entity was also at the top of the tunnel trying to wipe my memory more as I was going down. So after hearing yours, it brought up a remembrance in me, and there's lots of that happens. So I think we could definitely do that, in the future with tons of other remembrances and other things that, happened. So
Great. Well, yeah, and for the viewers, I just want to stress again, we are relying on our own memories. This is what we know happened to us. And, we may have studied other cases, other reports. There's so many ways people claim they can access the other side, whether it's through past life regression, hypnosis, whether it's through DMT or ayahuasca, whether it's through astral projection, whether it's through um, spiritualism or NDE accounts. And yes, there's pre-birth memory accounts. Some people with pre-birth memories have very short, simple memories. Others have very extensive memories. But we're going to try to just discuss what we know happened in our minds, which we ourselves personally know as facts. I will say that to those who really think the other side is about love and light, let me say for most of my life, I thought that, and I sincerely understand where they're coming from. But I will say that after getting more knowledge, spending time reading about all these different accounts, like I mentioned, there's also, alien involvement. There's all sorts of people who experience these situations, but we're just going to try to know and base our discussions on what we recall and what we can jointly conclude about this system, because that's where I think our strength lies. And this is something that's never been done on YouTube to our knowledge so far. So I think, discussions between people with pre-birth memories is the first step. And finally, there's really no organization like there is for NDEs educationally that studies individuals like us with our memories in these accounts. So hats off to you, Harold, for being a brave man and getting out there and getting the message out.
Seth, thank you so much again for joining me, and it's been a complete pleasure having you and an honor, seriously. And I'm glad that I met you. You're now a friend for life. So, and with that being said, we've been talking behind the scenes a little bit about you contributing a little bit to, the End of Agnoia. And what kind of approach do you think you might take creating content with us?
Well, I'm trying to keep the viewers in mind, especially individuals who never had an NDE or pre-birth memory or other type of spiritual like experience, in that we want to consider all aspects of what we're discussing. So I'm looking forward to doing some discussion topic videos with you, and looking at what science has to say about the topic, what religion has to say about the topic, what different individuals who had experiences say about the topic, to try to present what we know, what we really know, to develop our thoughts on how the system works, and what can we do one way or the other with our lives, and also after we die with our souls. So I'm looking to that kind of open-minded approach, and we're not saying that we know exactly how the system works on the other side. We don't. If there is a matrix or soul trap, we don't know exactly how to escape it. There's people out there telling us to do this or that to try, but there's a lot of different approaches. And I just want us to be the most accurate source for these types of discussions. And if you're amenable to that, I really look forward to doing some future videos on certain topics. And I think the viewers can also, in the comment section, propose some different topics that we discuss going forward in the future.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. So, yeah, like you said, just let us know if there's anything you guys want to talk about specifically. We're an open book. So, yeah, again, Seth, thanks for joining me. It's been awesome. I've been wanting to do this forever. So, thanks for taking the time to talk to me. And again, like I've said in my other videos, it's just there's a lot to cover. So, thanks again.
Thank you, Harold.